Hey everyone, so as promised, yesterday I did new Land Beyond testing on stream, as well as a bunch of other stuff that was listed in the TWID. And so yeah, today we're going to be talking about that. I have a little summary page that I've written here that you guys can take a look at and follow along with me, but I'll be going into the details as we move throughout this video. So first things first, Lord of Wolves did get its nerf. It was a 28% nerf, not a 30% nerf. Yeah, technical, whatever. But yeah, 28% nerf. And so where does that land? That is actually less of a nerf than we expected. And even with the nerf that we did expect, we did say Lord of Wolves is still going to be very strong. And so if we go to the sustain tab and we scroll all the way up, all the way, where is it? Ooh, right here, Lord of Wolves. So compared to other exotic single weapon choices or just legendary single weapon choices, this thing is still rank 10, right? So pretty good. Darcy, probably not even realistic. Some of this stuff, not even realistic, right? Like slide shot surrounded crux, Warlord Sigil times 5 winter bite, again, not realistic. So being this high, especially for a special weapon, that's really good, right? And the total damage, it's rivaling Acreus, right? It's better than Acreus. It's almost matching like a surrounded relentless bequest with Pack Hunter from Ergo, right? So this thing is still a pretty strong outlier, but it is not as overtuned as it used to be. And obviously this requires it to be hitting crits all the time, which is not necessarily realistic. You need a div for that, or you need a boss that stands completely still, like Templar, or floats completely still, I should say, like Templar, which is what I use to test Lord of Wolves. So yeah, this is still, a very, very strong kind of overperformer here, but not like insanely OP, I would say, right? But it's still, better than like an Envious Bait Edge Transit, or like an Acreus, right? Which is, and these are both using Rain of Fire, by the way, which obviously Lord of Wolves does not use Rain of Fire, it's just manual reloads. So pretty crazy stuff from Lord of Wolves there. Next up, some primaries got tuned. I just wanted to check in on them and make sure the numbers that were stated are correct. I've updated the archetype tier list, or I haven't changed tiering or anything, but I've updated the archetype tier list with the data, at least, for the per shot values of these primaries. So high impact autos got a 4% buff. Precision's autos got a 0.5% nerf. Again, these are PvP targeted, so don't worry about PvE because these are very small numbers. Because the crit multiplier on precision autos got changed from 1.75 to 1.7, which I verified. We have rapid fire pulses, which also got a 1% buff. So, interesting. Heavy burst slugs. So this one's kind of interesting because Bungie said that they were going to buff it by, I think, 10% or something like that. But they didn't buff it. So me and some of the other people, like Quantum, for example, have been testing heavy burst slugs, and there's no health bar change. There is no like true damage number on screen or on wipe screen that has changed. Heavy burst slugs actually did not receive any buff at all. So I assume that will be fixed by Bungie over the coming weeks because they said they were going to buff them. We'll talk about the damage viability of heavy burst slugs when that change happens. But for now, they weren't buffed. Okay, Finality's Auger turret, I did verify that it was in fact a 10% buff compared to before. So let's go ahead and scroll down all the way to the bottom of this list here and find out where Finality's Auger actually sits. So Finality's Auger, down. So this is our sustain stuff. You can see here like Osteostriga, Anarchy's here, and Finality's Auger is also here. So Finality's Auger, total damage looking pretty crispy at almost 10 million. Obviously this takes 213 seconds to do that 10 million damage. So, obviously more of a sustained damage option. But now we're looking here and it's kind of similar to Anarchy, right? They're almost identical. They're within like 50 sustained DPS of each other. And I did test it. It does remark a target by itself. You don't need to keep painting the target over and over. And generally speaking, the quality of life improvements are very noticeable. So all you really have to do with this weapon is just pull it out, place down the turret, paint the target, and then boom, you can just leave it and it'll just run until the turret expires, right? After like 14 bursts of its shots or so, right? Which is very nice for sure. Next season we'll have to see whether or not, just swapping to Anarchy, bang, stick, 2 traps versus Finality's Auger, swapping to the turret gun, placing the turret down, painting target, and then swapping off. Whether or not this kind of, the clunkiness of having to place down a turret, whether the damage buffs to this gun and the quality of life improvements to this gun have actually made it so that it's better than Anarchy in most situations for like swap DPS where you're using Auger as like a tick damage option rather than Anarchy. So we'll definitely take a look at that in the future. But for now, I'm going to leave it at that. It is basically identical to Anarchy when it comes to DPS now, with bait and switch active. Okay, so that is that. And finally, the star of the show for today. Okay, new Land Beyond. I have seen plenty of people and have received plenty of questions about this sniper, and most of the reception has been very positive. People are saying, this sniper is very nice, it's very good. I saw a bunch of people posting videos in some servers that I'm in. For example, this one got a lot of play, right? 6 new Land Beyond versus the Witness, easy one phase, right? And I've also seen another video where I believe Amory, I don't know if I'm saying that name correctly, did a solo Nezarec with New Land Beyond, right? So a lot of people are hyped about this thing. And some of the comments here are even saying stuff like power creeping every DPS sniper ever, or a $600 damage phase, or people claiming that, Bungie made this weapon insanely overtuned so that people would pre-order their DLC. And I have to say, after looking at the numbers, I strongly disagree. This is another case of the community being very hyped by something that has come out, that is new, that's being kind of paraded around by content creators, that is just not, it's good for some things, but I wouldn't say it's good for boss damage, right? So I thought I was going crazy. This is actually the biggest amount of dissonance that I've experienced between my testing results and the community sentiment around a weapon in a long time. It's been quite a while since I've experienced this level of kind of disparity when it comes to me looking at the numbers and being like, why is everyone hyped about this thing? So I triple checked this. I triple checked all these things to verify that I'm not going crazy. Okay, so real quick, let's go ahead and start with this 6 New Land Beyond versus the Wiz. And by the way, this is by no means to, bog on my dog here, excuse the pun, but because he's just having fun, and this is it's a fun video he's doing with his community, but I just want to kind of provide a reality check when it comes to how good this weapon actually is, for damage. At least for damage. We'll talk about how good it is for maybe roam content out of this stuff in a second here, but for damage, how good is it? Okay, so real quick, for those of you that don't know, the Witness's health approximately is around 26.8 million total damage across his entire health bar. Most bosses in Destiny have a 15% final stand. So we're going to take out 15% of his health and give him 22.8 million, which is the 85% of his remaining health bar. Okay? Now the amount of time that they take to kill this boss, Witness, normally has a 45-second damage phase. Now sometimes you can get lucky and it'll be a little bit longer than that, or a lot longer than that in some cases, as people has probably seen in solo Witness examples. But they take 42 out of 45 seconds to kill the Witness, so they barely don't kill him. And as you probably hear at the end of this video, when they are about to reach final stand, Bog is like, lock in, because obviously this is not their first attempt. So this is not like an easy breezy one phase. If you took 6 Queen Breakers and people are shooting the boss the whole time and they're not dying on repeat, it would basically be first try, right? So like, this is not necessarily like a crazy kill. It's 42 out of 45 seconds, right? The Witness is raising his hand to slam by the time that they reach final stand. Okay, so that's number one. So number two, if you divide 22.8 million by 6 people, which is the number of people they had, it's 3.8 million damage per person over 42 seconds. The DPS required over 42 seconds to kill the Witness from each person is 90.4k. Okay, so 90,400 damage around there per second. Now, No Land Beyond's DPS from, if you're starting at 0 stacks, so no pre-stacking like they said, is 116.2 thousand. And I can show you that right over here. Let's scroll up, right over here. 116, there you go. New Land Beyond, did I say No Land Beyond? Sorry. New Land Beyond starts at the Master times 0, and with Lunafaction boots, 3 loaders are fitting aspect rally barricade. I don't think they had all these things, but it doesn't make that much of a difference, right? So with that fire rate, 116.2k, right? And now they don't have a debuff. They don't have a debuff this entire time. I don't think they fell into finish or weakened or any of that. I was watching the numbers the whole time. They don't have a debuff, okay? So I take out the 1.3, because all the numbers in the sustain tab, they use surges, 3 surges, 1.22, which they all had, kinetic surges. They use buff, which is just well, 1.25, no Lumina. And they use tractor, or they don't use tractor, but this tab uses tractor. So I divided 116.2k by 1.3 to get rid of tractor. And without the debuff, it's 89.4k, which is eerily close to 90.4k. And if you see, they're using limit break on some people, right? So if we go to 30 seconds, you'll see exactly what I mean. Because, 89.4k, 90.4k, that essentially assumes that everybody is playing perfectly for the entire damage phase. They're shooting right when damage starts. They all have buff, kinetic weapon boost the entire time. They're all sitting in wall the entire time. Nobody dies. Nobody loses damage from jumping, etc., 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 right? So they're not playing perfectly, obviously, because they're all humans, right? So where does this extra damage come from to meet this 90.4k requirement? Well, if we go ahead and go to 30 seconds right here, you'll see Bog places his well, right? So I want you to look at the damage numbers before here real quick. Go ahead and look at the damage numbers here, right? 186, 420, 186, 420, and let me skip backward a little bit here. You're seeing him hitting 141k, and if you fired this gun, since it came out maybe yesterday or today, that the jump between 2 shots is not going to go from 140-ish k to 186k between 2 shots, right? And the difference between these two numbers is, I believe it's like 1.28 times or something like that. So limit break is in effect here, right? So if you guys don't know, if you watch my channel, you probably know this, but when you place down a well and then you shoot weapons in your well as the well caster, for the duration of you being in your own well, your weapon damage counts as super damage. And limit break boosts super damage, right? For 8 seconds after you cast your super. So in this case, you'll see here, he's going to hit some pretty high numbers, 188, 165, 167, 169, and then you'll suddenly see it drop down to 131. You saw that? Suddenly you'll see it'll drop down to 131. So that's limit break going away. That's again, he plays well around 30 seconds. This is around 8 seconds in. That's limit break gone, right? So that's my explanation for the disparity there. That's how they made up 89.4 to 90.4 when it comes to being able to actually kill him in 42 seconds. So with limit break, again, this is totally reasonable. So the real question is killing the witness as 6 people in 42 seconds impressive, right? Is 90k damage without debuff or 116.2k damage impressive? Absolutely not. I'm sorry, like absolutely not. Okay, so the thing is, right, this weapon, again, they're not using it optimally, as he admits in his description. No damage supers, no pre-stacking, no catalyst required, there's a special weapon, etc., right? So again, you killed the witness. That's you know, that's fairly decent, right? But if we look in the grand scheme of things, 116.2k DPS, this is like what, 112th on the sustained ranking? Like there is a lot of stuff, including special weapons, by the way, that is a lot higher than this. So the only real outlier here when it comes to this weapon is when we look at the total damage. So I have another row here that simulates using this weapon basically perfectly. You start at 20 stacks, which is kind of like the point of diminishing returns, because at 20 stacks you hit a 70% damage boost. That's a 70% perk boost to your weapon. And at 100 stacks you have a 73% boost. So most people have agreed 20 stacks when it turns to like the Grandmaster, that's like when it's kind of, you know, you don't really need to stack any more than that. And, you know, that's like a good place to start doing damage calculation, right? So I didn't up it to 73%, right? I just kind of assumed it would stay at 70% for the rest of the shots here. So in theory, the number would be like a tiny bit higher, but let's just say 70% for all of the shots, right? Now, for those of you that don't know, there is a sprint canceling method that you can use with New Land Beyond, where when you shoot the gun and then your glove on your character moves forward to kind of pull the bolt forward and then pull it backward. When your character pulls the bolt forward, if you sprint for an instant, it'll cancel the animation and then you can fire immediately after, right? So I actually have 2 numbers here because I did a bunch of testing here. And this number here, 1.133, is the time between shots if you perfectly sprint cancel with all of these kind of dexterity and handling buffs and reload buffs, you know, included, right? So a lot of people have noticed that if you boost the reload of the sniper, you boost the handling on the sniper with Lunafaction boost, with loader mods, with Ophidian aspect, with Rally Barricade, with all these things, it makes you do the bolt animation trigger faster, right? So with all these things stacked, the fastest shot to shot time I was able to get was 1.133 seconds. So this thing says on the tin, it fires at 72 RPM, which an aggressive sniper actually fires every 0.833 seconds. So that's a big difference. It's a big difference. If this thing actually fired at 72 RPM, I mean, I could just show you right here is 0.833, it would have a lot higher DPS, right? That's actually pretty respectable. 174k. Remember, Lord of Wolves is sitting around 200k, right? So that's actually pretty respectable. But because of this inherent kind of bolt delay that you have to deal with, even if you're sprint canceling, the DPS is not, it's not that high, right? This is not actually 72 RPM gaming, right? And then if you don't sprint cancel, right? So let me go ahead and find the other one here. Yeah, there you go. If you don't sprint cancel and you basically just do what Bog was doing, which is just allowing the bolt to go forward and just basically holding left click, right? Then the DPS is even lower, right? So the only green here, the only real outlier here is the total damage, right? It has 9 million total, which is pretty respectable for a special, right? I mean, you're not going to find this even like 4 times a charm Praetits. I think it's sitting at like 5 million or something like that. I mean, if I go to Praetits right now, even without the Darcy buff, let me exclude that real quick because that's cheating. It still hits like 5 million total, right? And you go for like other, you know, specials that are known for their total damage. Euphony 0 stacks, 5.2 million. Euphony with 25 stacks, 6.2 million. So nothing comes close to this 9 million number, right? And so the real reason why this gun might perform other guns on the Witness is because of its total damage, right? The Witness has one of the longest DPS phases of all raid bosses in Destiny. 45 seconds is crazy long. And so a lot of the weapons on this list, you can see this time to empty column here, right? A lot of these where the number is lower than 45, you're going to run out of ammo, where New Land Beyond is going to be able to keep shooting because it takes 65 seconds to dump all of New Land Beyond's ammo with perfect sprint canceling and max reload, right? So that's where New Land Beyond might kind of, come into play here. But I will say the DPS is low enough. It's low enough compared to the other weapons on this, on this kind of, sustained ranking, that it's going to become problematic in some phases. Like, it's going to be not able to hit some damage checks, right? So, and to say that this weapon is power creeping every DPS sniper ever is just ridiculous. I mean, we literally just had like pre-nerf still hunt, what, like a year ago, less than a year ago, which even post-nerf still hunt is outperforming this thing if you give it some reload assists, right? And pre-nerf still hunt was like, I don't know, way higher on this list than something like New Land Beyond in its current state. Now, New Land Beyond could get a catalyst that could make it better. I don't know. If the catalyst allowed it to shoot at 72 RPM, we'll have another conversation then. But I just want to kind of like, give it like a little reality check here in terms of DPS, right? So like, damage per second. This gun is not very good. It's not very good, right? Even with the perfect sprint canceling, which I'll show a clip on screen, which, takes a bit of effort, takes a bit of mental juggling to kind of get that timing right and not mess it up. Even with that, it's not that good, right? I was hoping with the sprint canceling tech, which Bungie has confirmed is intentional, it would be good, but it is not that good. And the DPS increase between sprint canceling and non-sprint canceling is not that high. It's like, it's not that high. You can see it on the spreadsheet. You can do the math yourself. It's not that high. So yeah. And then a lot of people are saying, they're kind of shocked, kind of talking to me saying like, are you sure Euphony can also one-phase the witness? I'm pretty sure if you got like 6 people with Euphony, I'm not going to test this myself, but because I don't know. I'm pretty confident these numbers at this point, I've like triple checked it, but I'm pretty confident if you got 6 people with Euphony and like, I don't know, they were all on like a threat of evolution or something, like I'm pretty sure they'd also one phase the witness. I mean, even with no particle, by the way, even with no particle, like no debuff, same circumstances as kind of Bog's video here. Yeah, I think they'd also one phase the witness, if not come very close. So yeah, this gun its performance is not that surprising. Now I will say, so I've been kind of a negative Nancy so far, but I want to talk about the positives of this weapon, right? So I made a little Desmos, sorry if I flashbanged you. I made a little Desmos graph here that we can kind of look at, and it shows you the performance of this weapon as you increase in stacks, right? So first of all, what I do want to note is that the sharpness of the buff increase is very fast, right? It's very, very fast. Like even at something like 10 stacks, you're talking about a 50% buff here, right? Which is pretty high. And the per shot damage of this sniper, right? An aggressive frame sniper with recombination. So I'm thinking something like a succession, for example, right? Is this purple line here. So this gun at, what is it? Like 7 stacks, at 7 stacks, matches a recombination succession. And it's for every shot, right? So you don't need to like re-get recombination, obviously, on this weapon. And even if you, miss a target or whatever, it doesn't really matter. You're going to keep your stacks, right? And this weapon has a ton of shots. Even without reserve mods, you have 40 plus shots. So it's pretty good for, I think, maybe some speedrunning instances or some challenge instances where you want to deal with something like a Tormentor, right? Where you have a priority on doing a specific amount of threshold damage on a single target, like a bulky target, and you want to be able to maybe swap to the weapon and not be penalized too much when it comes to ammo efficiency, or you want to have the weapon on to begin with and just be able to use it for an entire activity without having to worry about special ammo pickups. So that's what I want to talk about here. I think this weapon is more of a roam content kind of gameplay sort of weapon because it is far more ammo efficient than something like an Izzy. Because in speedrunning, we use Izzy all the time to deal with stuff like Tormentors and, bursting down mini bosses in a single shot. This weapon is probably capable of dealing with those same enemies in a single shot or in 2 shots, and it is much more ammo efficient, right? Because if we take a look at the total damage of Izzy, for example, that's pretty bad, right? 2.2 million, and that's with honing before you rally and with triple reserves, etc., etc. So, it's not even close, the total damage between the two, and obviously you don't need to hone New Land Beyond. Some people have been asking about New Land Beyond's viability when it comes to rotations. I haven't included it in the swap tab because I genuinely do not think it is worth using for rotations. In my opinion, having to kind of cock the weapon and, pull the bolt back, and every time you pull out the weapon is a real turnoff when it comes to, DPS rotations. And its per shot damage, while it is like respectable, I don't think that it is high enough to warrant using in a DPS rotation, especially when we have other weapons that are, I would say, significantly stronger when it comes to swap DPS. Or like tick weapons where you don't even need to pull out the weapon to reproc Envious on something like Hezen. I could be wrong about this. I'll probably update the swap tab and do some more testing, but I don't think New Land Beyond is going to be particularly relevant for DPS. Maybe its catalyst will change things like I've said, but yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about New Land Beyond. Again, I hate to be a party pooper here, but I really have gone over the numbers multiple times. This thing is not power creeping DPS snipers. It is just very good total damage. It's you know, it's nice that the buff stays pretty much indefinitely. I think it disappears when you die, but you know, besides that, pretty much stays indefinitely. Has a lot of total damage, so you know, people have been soloing GMs and stuff with it, which is pretty funny. But I think it's kind of a gimmicky weapon that has a very strongly defined niche, which I think is fine. That's a lot of exotic weapons are like that, and arguably it's more useful than a lot of exotic weapons that are very gimmicky. So you know, it's not necessarily bad or anything, but it's certainly not a DPS pinnacle or a DPS, you know, power creeping beast like some people have been suggesting. So that's all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me ramble about DPS for a bit. If you have any questions, again, feel free to leave them in the comments, or if I missed anything, again, or maybe I'm using the weapon wrong or something, yeah, again, feel free to leave them in the comments. It's a very new weapon, so maybe I am mistaken here. But again, yeah, there's a lot of these weapons here that are going to outperform it in DPS that are going to fall behind over a long phase like Witness, right? Because 25 seconds, you know, 21 seconds, 35 seconds. Again, Witness phase is 45, right? So again, that's what you're dealing with here. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.